Minor spoilers for X-Men Fantastic Four by writer Chip Zdarsky, I hope I said that right, and illustrator Terry Dodson. As I'm sure any comic book reader knows about now, the X-Men are no longer just a superhero team, but a team dedicated to protecting one country, and ultimately, when it counts, one species. Mutants, the next step in mankind's evolution, but that in itself has made mutants targets of repression, prejudice, and attack. So much so that they felt the need to create their own island nation made by mutants, for mutants, one and all. But one of the strongest of these mutants has knowingly not accepted the invitation to the mutant nation of Krakoa, one of the strongest people on planet Earth, possibly one of the strongest characters in the Marvel Universe, and definitely the most powerful mutant, Franklin Richards, powerhouse of the Fantastic Four, and the son of Reed Richards and Sue Storm, Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the problem is spelling itself out. There's a bid by the X-Men, particularly the Quiet Council who leads the nation of Krakoa, to have all mega-level mutants, of which Franklin is the strongest, to be a citizen of Krakoa. The problem is, he is the son of two superhero parents who don't want him to leave the nest. So this is where the conflict begins. Do I need to be so dramatic? Probably not. Is this book full of familial and professional melodrama? Absolutely. Is it really good? Oh yeah. For some context, this is the first X-Men event since Jonathan Hickman's House of X kicked off the new status quo for the X-Men. I don't know if they still consider this an event, but it feels like one and it reads like one. It was supposed to be over months ago actually, but the coronavirus delay just kind of ruined my life. And apparently anyone who wanted to read comic books for like a long time. But now that issue 4 has finally come out, it's really like the perfect time to go back and read it in full. It's not a long read, there's only 4 issues. I did it in an afternoon, I have to tell you. It's well worth it. For the longest time, the X-Men have been getting the short staff at Marvel Comics, because another company owns the movie rights, or did. But now that Disney bought Fox, we can get good comic books again from the X-Men. And if you ask me, they are delivering. The first issue of this event miniseries encapsulates what I love about the new status quo. All the X-Men, the mutant anti-heroes and villains alike are all in one place, and they are all more or less getting along, or at least peacefully arguing with each other. This means anyone can appear, so it's X-Men galore in nearly every page of the first issue. Everyone makes an appearance, and outside the Quiet Council, everyone's pretty warm to each other, except Quentin Quire, because no one likes him. But the opening of Kitty Pryde going through the island is a bit heartwarming considering everything mutants have been through the past few years. Seeing even the Stepford Cuckoos have a personality beyond being a villainous hive mind is nice to see. Everyone's getting happy in this status quo, and in this first event, it really sells it. Hell, even Magneto was extra polite to Kitty for deciding to help them recruit one Franklin Richards. And I wanted to point that out because the rest of the series is well thought out drama on top of drama. It's just kind of ironic considering how peaceful the first issue starts out. But I will say the first issue isn't actually the X-Men versus the Fantastic Four issue, as in like the problem of the book, but is really the true impetus of the story with Franklin Richards versus his father, Mr. Fantastic. Franklin is the strongest mutant possibly to ever live, but he's losing his powers and at a rate where he's gonna maybe lose them permanently. His father, one of, if not the smartest man in the Marvel Universe, can't figure out why. So this has Franklin posing an important point about his father that I think has crossed the mind of many a Fantastic Four fan before. If Reed Richards can fix everything, why not his own son's diminishing powers, and the powers that make the Thing look like he does? It's not so much a question of whether Reed is as smart as everyone thinks he is, but as good a man as everyone thinks he is, maybe even just on a subconscious level. Writer Chip Zdarsky in question shows how he truly knows not only the X-Men but the Fantastic Four. Throughout this book he captures the desires of these characters, like how Reed and Sue Richards want to raise their kids around normal people so they know the world and have worldly experiences, while at the same time he understands their faults enough to point out how this desire to give their kids world experience actually endangers everyone on their New York City's block, Yancey Street. That's a weird name. I wonder if that's a real place in New York. At the same time though, he also understands how the X-Men want a home to protect themselves, and all mutant them so they build an island away from the world, but at the same time, an island named Genosha, made by mutants for mutants just like Krakoa, is where more mutants die than ever in history, 16 million murdered to be exact. So Zdarsky knows his stuff. He knows the cracks in the statues of the X-Men and the Fantastic Four that make up their attractive features. More than that, he manages to paint both the X-Men and the Fantastic Four as a whole as being both gray in this conflict, with their own rights and wrongs. Really, it's only Mr. Fantastic, Professor X, and Magneto who come off as being clearly and purposely antagonistic, versus, say, the Invisible Woman who's just overly protective. Mr. Fantastic does the cruel but fatherly thing of making the decision to literally hide his son's mutant genes, even seemingly referencing it as a problem. To him, it's as if being a mutant were the problem, like any of the number of things being a mutant has been an allegory for, i.e. being gay. And then there's Professor X and Magneto pretty much saying they are the genetic elite, which would piss off anyone who's not one of them. So those three are the good guys who are being assholes in this book. But no one feels out of character save for maybe Sue Storm. She's anywhere from hyper-aggressive to overtly motherly at times. But her motivations are strong enough that I don't think it's anywhere near what happened to Captain Marvel in Civil War 2. Yikes. Everyone who appears though, even if just for a few conversations or one good moment, is perfectly captured. There isn't any character development for anyone outside of Franklin and Reed Richards, but everyone's captured at their best in ways they technically don't need to be. A favorite moment of mine is when the X-Men and Fantastic Four are physically fighting, and the way the X-Men overcome the Invisible Woman is not by brute force, but by Emma Frost taking control of the Human Torch, with snarky condescension, and turns his powers on his sister. Even when Magneto self-righteously prepares to declare war at any moment, honestly, but somehow does it with maturity, tells me that Sardowski gets these characters and deserves to write more for them. Before I go further away from the stellar writing, I can't not touch on the villain of the story. The X-Men and Fantastic Four may be at odds, but Dr. Doom is the villain, and he reminds everyone why he's the best villain Marvel's got. How he talks around Professor X and the mutants' play for diplomatic immunity for all mutants reminds the reader that there are moral flaws to how mutants see themselves as the next evolutionary step. Yes, they are born physically superior, but is Wolverine with claws sticking out of his hands truly more important or accomplished than a genius like Iron Man? Dr. Doom isn't a mutant, but yet he can take on the X-Men and Fantastic Four with ease. So is Professor X really anything but condescending and presumptuous himself to declare that not some mutants, but all mutants deserve diplomatic immunity? This is what makes Dr. Doom an intellectual threat. He's another one of, if not actually, the smartest man on the planet, between his master of science and magic. This doesn't mean he's always physically crushing everyone, but he's also dismantling what they believe in while uplifting his own, even hypocritically at times. Sardowski, of course, never forgets to make Doom statistically entertaining. How he puts mutants into Doombots to trick Wolverine to killing other mutants makes him a devious threat unlike any other. At the same time, the way he speaks in the third person and always seems to make himself the victim is amazing. Like on paper, nothing he said is technically wrong. People do come and accuse him of doing things while doing wrong themselves. At the same time, he actually did what they accused him of. It's like whenever he comes against a hero, it's a struggle for them to not be dragged down to his level in order to win. Plus, the way he speaks of his actions makes it seem like as if nothing he does is a crime in his mind. He's insane, but he doesn't sound like it. One moment, he'll be talking about how his citizens are being attacked and killed by the X-Men, but in reality, it was an accident, and it happened because he trapped them in Doombots, so no one knew they were fighting real people. It's delightfully evil and genius. Dr. Doom is the master of being offended by people who accuse him of doing things he actually did. I can go either way on the Infodump pages, though, that have found their way into nearly every X-Men comic since Hickman started Donovan. While Hickman's are always something interesting, others have been hit or miss with them. Sardowski does use them well, even revealing things about the world in Krakoa that's more than interesting to know. Like a graph implying that there are around 50 Omega-level mutants when we only know about who half of them are. It's an exciting prospect to get more ultra-powerful mutants on Krakoa. There is one weakness to the Infodumps, though, in this book, and I will call them Infodumps because that is what they are, as enjoyable as some of them may be. The God Power subplot, explaining how mutants and superhumans can defy the law of the conservation of energy, is ultimately a weakness. As a guy who paid enough attention in physics, the idea of explaining how the Human Torch or Iceman can expel the massive amounts of energy they do is interesting, possibly because of the coronavirus-induced delay of the last issue. This subplot is mostly dropped. This theory that the energy that allows the mutants and the superhumans to use their powers are the same, it has the capacity to make mutants like Wolverine and Magneto barely any different from people who get their powers from events or experiments like Spider-Man and Mr. Fantastic. Suddenly, every superhuman could arguably deserve the treatment mutants do in Professor's New World. Maybe mutants shouldn't be the only ones allowed on Krakoa. Maybe every person with power should be considered above the human race, that no superpowered hero is truly one of the unpowered folk they protect. Or maybe it's just a surface level argument against the X-Men needing an entire nation to themselves. No matter how deep you go, the idea of there being a god power that all superheroes take their energy from is interesting, but disappointingly forgotten. It could get picked up later, but this book makes no notion of where it would. I didn't expect this book to complete this idea, but to set it up for the future. I think how it goes unmentioned and maybe forgotten, which is a bit disappointing. Truly though, if Kitty Pryde, and I'm not calling her Kate, is one of your favorite X-Men, you'll really love the story, especially since she's dead in her own comic and that wasn't delayed like this one was. Kitty Pryde and Franklin are truly the heart of the story. She's the one Professor X and Magneto asked to talk to him and help him decide to come to Krakoa, calling back to a 1987 storyline where Franklin was there for Kitty when everyone thought she was going to die in Dr. Doom's castle. Long story short, they trust each other and care for each other implicitly. And even though their relationship has been a thing for literally decades, it's still kind of weird how they really haven't spent any much time together in those decades. It's just been implied that they've had a relationship, not a romantic one, purely platonic. So it is still better. It's not ridiculous enough that it's distracting. And quick aside, the art and the covers done by Terry Dawson for this book are truly fantastic. He captures the most important features and the character defining traits of every character he draws. Emma Frost is another perfect example, with Dawson perfectly capturing the arrogance behind her smile, and the fact that she can back it up, or the Invisible Woman's protective hand constantly seeking to protect and watch over her family. And just to finish off this review with how this book ends, the ending is fantastic. While it does forget about the idea of the god power, it does not forget to tell us at least one possible reason why Franklin's powers are diminishing in the first place. How it's revealed between Professor X and Mr. Fantastic harkens back to some of the classic dynamics found in their old Illuminati days, and the punishment for the person at fault is delectably savage. This is a book for Fantastic Four fans and X-Men fans alike, and nearly everyone comes to the party for at least a small cameo or appearance. All the long-standing relationships are used well, and no one is short-staffed or ruined. It's what canon miniseries strive to be, and this will definitely be on my shortlist for the best comic book of the year so far. Hats off to you, Chip.